I'm Agent Morris with the NSA.
There is something real here.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had people with the first-hand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General. Biologics came to some of these recoveries.
Those could represent exquisite new adversary technology.
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
The government is covering up some level of its knowledge and understanding about what some of those things are.
The Sol Foundation, which just announced a new initiative for UFO research and policy.
It's nuts, man. I mean, we're just small-town buds who saw a UFO in the woods. I mean, now we're hanging out with the government.
Wow. What floor were you guys on?
Hey, everybody. Welcome aboard. This is Smiles Lewis. You are tuned in to another live edition, or maybe you're tuning in pre-recorded. This is the Anomaly-NOW Weekly News RoundUp show for the 501c nonprofit Anomaly Archives, straight out of Austin, Texas. I am your host, Smiles Lewis. Oh, right, man. As usual, you can find out more about us at our website, anomalyarchives.org. You can find all the links to our news articles at our Flipboard account, flipboard.com/@anomalyarchives. And I'm going to dive right in because I want to keep this short because my good friend Greg Bishop is doing a presentation, well, starting right about now, on alien languages and the work of researcher Mario Pazzaglini and others. And I'm looking forward to checking that out. It's through our friends at Conspiranormal. Full disclosure, years ago, I met them at the 2017 Roswell, New Mexico conferences and started carrying them on my personal web radio hobby station, Anomaly Radio Network, and carried them for years. They do great stuff, great interviews. They do an annual conference. It's really cool down in, is it Memphis? It's in Tennessee, or maybe it's in Nashville. I forget, but the fun stuff. And so after this, I'm going straight over to there to watch Greg talk about alien languages. So what's on the plate for tonight? The usual fare, all kinds of links over at our Flipboard, but I did want to do a brief focus on this Telegraph article that's reprinted at yahoo.com, Sleep Paralysis Demons, and why they're different to nightmares, written by Ceri, C-E-R-I, Roberts. This is published April 23rd. And is, as I said, carried over at the yahoo.com lifestyle section. Lifestyle. Apparently they have a section called Conquer. Oh, no, that's the title in the URL. Conquer Sleep Paralysis Demons. First of all, I got to say, I've never heard this so cavalierly termed sleep paralysis demons. Now, it's a very common phenomenon, sleep paralysis, and it is a fairly common phenomenon among sufferers of sleep paralysis to experience a sensed presence and for it to have a negative connotation and thus feed into all kinds of archetypal fears. I mean, obviously, humanity in its evolving through time has always feared the vulnerability of being asleep. And the hypnopompic and hypnagogic phases that we move through on our way into and out of a sleep cycle are very prone, apparently, to these kinds of hallucinations. Not very. It's still considered a fairly rare phenomena, but there's been a lot of studies of this over the years. The one that they're citing here, I think, is linked over at sciencedirect.com. One study reported that out of 185 patients diagnosed with sleep paralysis, more than half, 58%, sensed a presence in the room, usually something non-human, and 22% actually saw a person in the room, usually a stranger. Professor Chris French, head of the Anomalistic Psychology Research Unit at Goldsmiths University of London, says, quote, the content of the hallucinations experienced during an episode of sleep paralysis can vary enormously, but certain themes tend to occur more often than others. One of these is that of demons, as beautifully illustrated in a famous painting, The Nightmare, by Henry Fuseli, dating back to 1781. Now, they relate this, of course, to the tales of incubi and succubi, sex-crazed demons, quote unquote, from the Middle Ages in Europe. But and it's often most commonly referred to as the night hag phenomena, because in the, I believe, maybe Norwegian or Northern European climes, the visage that was most commonly reported, thank you, Victor, for that image, that is a very famous painting, and you can see off to the left the nightmare, as in horse, like a mare as a horse, and then there's this other like kind of goblin-esque being on the chest, and that's one of the most common physiological descriptions, is this suffocating feeling, or it's first and foremost a feeling of immobility, and of course this relates to the body's natural way of protecting you from acting out physically what you were dreaming. But these nightmares tend to fall into archetypal patterns that are specific to the culture in which one grows up. There may be other factors that are beyond enculturation, but like perhaps electromagnetic imprinting, or the noosphere, or the collective unconscious of different locations. Will people who haven't been enculturated experience the culturally common themes of this phenomena if they haven't been exposed to it? Who knows? But the point is, and where I'm going with this is, this has been a very common and strong skeptical explanation for the alien abduction phenomena. So later in the article, it specifies the differences between hypnagogic and hypnopompic. Hypnagogic hallucinations occur when falling asleep. Hypnopompic hallucinations occur when waking up. My only experiences with this, I believe, well, actually, it gets a little complicated. One of my most specific memories of experiencing this myself was when a friend was visiting from out of town. This was many, many years ago, back in the mid 1990s. And I had to get up really early to take him to the airport. And if I remember correctly, the sleep paralysis and hypnagogic or pompic visualizations, hallucinations, dreams, whatever visions happened, I believe after I dropped him off and come back to the house and tried to go back to sleep. And so I was already kind of still in a liminal state. The article says both tend to happen when you are partially conscious during REM. So there is a tendency to see a distorted version of what is already there. A draft from the window conjures up a shadowy figure hiding behind the curtains, or a pile of cushions is transformed into a monster emerging from under the bed. Now, some people are really terrorized by these phenomena, and it can become a very problematic experience that recurs. And what can cause this? Stress and anxieties, post-traumatic stress disorder, sleep deprivation, and substance abuse, among other things. Quote-unquote research indicates that many people report stressful life events or emotional changes before these episodes, and there's also a link to the neurological condition narcolepsy, which interferes with the brain's ability to control wakefulness. Now, again, I mentioned that this article refers to quote-unquote sleep paralysis demons, and I guess they're just trying to drive home with that phraseology. They use the invoking of the word demon in a non-religious sense here, other just as a tormenting figure of some kind of immaterial or non-physical nature, but that feels to you as a a victim, a witness to this phenomena, as to be something demonic, something malicious. So in how to deal with this, typically people talk about just trying to concentrate on moving some small part of one's body to break the paralysis, to break oneself out of that hypnagogic, hypnopompic state, and hopefully end the sleep paralysis and any visions. Though in so many cases where these visions happen in sleep paralysis, it seems like sometimes the images actually will persist, at least briefly, into the quote unquote waking state, which begs the question. And if you've read books, and I was going to bring up a copy, one of my favorite book covers for a book called Apparitions by Celia Green and I think Charles McCurry. It's from the 1960s. It's an excellent overview of the variety of apparition cases, but it has a whole subsection. Actually, I think I'm conflating her other book, Lucid Dreams. There's a lot of research that's been done on this type of phenomena as far back as the 60s. And of course, I think obviously shamans and other spiritual traditions have been experimenting with this kind of thing for a long time. Yep, there's the book. Love that cover. From this article over at The Telegraph via yahoo.com, Batul Rolfe recommends disruption strategies such as trying to make small deliberate movements such as repetitive blinking or wiggling fingers and toes to end the paralysis. Some experts believe that practicing lucid dreaming, where you learn to take control of your dreams, can also help sufferers to overcome these frightening hallucinations. Yes, again, this is something I've experienced myself, and it's not the most common, but it's not uncommon to experiencing it at least once in one's life. But again, it's a far different thing to experience it on a regular basis. But what it really brings to mind to me is this idea that has been put forth. Again, sleep paralysis is often put forth as a debunking explanation for the vast majority of alien abductions, because so many alien abductions don't seem to have anything to do with UFOs, in that they often begin and end in the bedroom of the experiencer, the abductee, the victim, the survivor, however you want to say. And with the reference to the book Apparitions by Celia Green, and in her Lucid Dreams book, there's so many examples of people's visionary experiences that straddle that sleeping and waking dichotomy. And it just, to me, gets back to the heart of the nature of perception. We're all hallucinating. You are hallucinating right now. Everything that you think is terra firma and real is a hallucination, is a virtual representation of everything that's out there that is, physics tells us, mostly energy and information. Anyway, so, and would not the sleep paralysis phenomena actually be great cover for some sort of alien intelligence to inject itself into our reality? Perhaps. I really do think at the heart of all UFO phenomena, whether it be the sightings of objects and anomalous phenomena in the skies, in the water, in the environment around us, and the sometimes appearance of occupants, or in bedroom visitation style alien abductions, that at the heart of this is perhaps 50% or more some kind of naturally occurring phenomena that's just happens to be rare or happen in certain places at certain times and to certain people, but that it is also the gateway to anomalous cognition, anomalous information transfer, nay, telepathy, and other psychic phenomena, and thus a perfect chance for non-human other intelligences to intersect with our own consciousness. That's all speculative, obviously. One of the books that this also reminds me of, and I'm going to pull this up right now. This is available over at any of your favorite shopping sites. It's a book from 1999, The Abduction Enigma, an Investigation of the Alien Abduction Phenomena. This is a very skeptical book. It's by Kevin Randall, Russ Estes, and William P. Cohn. And those three authors, you probably have only heard of Kevin Randall. He's an old hat at the UFO Roswell beat and is still going. In fact, in the current Flipboard links, you can find links to his blog and his vodcast, his podcast, his radio show, whatever you want to call it. This book caused a lot of controversy. And in fact, it triggered, he wrote an article about the controversy that was published in Anomalous magazine, or not, the Anomalous number 8 or 9, I think, called Red Herrings and Alien Abductions. And a little quote from that. In July 1996, at the MUFON Symposium held in Greensboro, North Carolina, Bud Hopkins, famous abduction researcher, was disturbed by my paper about pop cultural influences on the imagery of alien abduction. He approached me and said, "You're not an abduction researcher." I reminded him that he used information about an abduction I had investigated in his first book on the topic. I have been investigating alien abductions since the mid-1970s, and apparently before Hopkins started. 4 years later, that same comment was made, even after having published a number of articles on the topic and having written 2 books about abduction. The second of those books, The Abduction Enigma, written with Russ Estes and William P. Cohn, has created something of a firestorm, with many attacking without attempting to understand the reason the book exists. Oh, that was from, yes, The Anomalous number 9. And I remember when, back 24 years ago, when my favorite UFO bulletin board email list, UFO Updates, run by Errol Bruce Knapp out of Canada. This is around January of 2000. Somebody reposted something from another forum with the very controversial subject line of 60% of abductees are gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And the quote, of course, is from Randall and Estes and Cohn from this book. And, it triggered quite an interesting discussion, which led to that article by Kevin Randall, I believe. And in my response, I said, years ago, researcher friends of mine in California mentioned how most of the abductees and almost all of the more contactee type experiencers they knew out west were rather asexual in this reality. In the cases where the abduction was traumatic, they were reflecting the understandable effects of post-rape type psychological problems, while the more new AG contactee types simply preferred their astral liaisons to anything that the physical flesh could offer. I've occasionally heard the idea expressed that homosexuality is nature's way of trying to balance out the population. More homosexuals would tend to mean less population. A biologist I know has suggested about that having a gay sibling would have survival value for a heterosexual child rearing couple by having another breadwinner, quote unquote, available to devote time and resources to child rearing. In the past, they weren't out trying to have a family of their own. They increased the chances for survival of the child rearing family genes. I know, controversial subjects said in 24 years ago. The reason I bring this up is because of the oft-reported alien agenda of marriage engineering, genetic manipulations, usually as their attempts to relate to saving our and or their own biological diversity due to the alien's supposed inability to reproduce sexually. They have no sex organs. In the time travel hypotheses, favor on this one is the idea that these aliens are our future selves and have returned to save ourselves from an impotent, hive-minded, sexless, infertile future. It also bears relevance to previous studies of experiencer populations, which related that CE, close encounter, encounterants often have, quote, a richness of inner life, relative weakness in the sense of identity, especially sexual identity, vulnerability in the interpersonal realm, unquote. The researcher, Dr. Parnell, also said the encounters were of above average intelligence. I then said, P.S. I know there will undoubtedly be objections to this material. However, I'm sure the level of dialogue will be as high as usual on these fine e-lists. And boy, people got really upset about this. And I think because they just perceived it as a dismissive way of othering these experiencers, these people who've undergone something traumatic. And so some of the critics, there was just a lot of back and forth, as there are in social media, and this being that it's equivalent 24 years ago. And so in people going, how, what's their background? What kind of survey or poll did they do with this? And I went on to explain, because I had a copy of the book, I believe. Information on the survey is available in their book. And we know from their past posts that you do not have Therefore, I've taken it upon myself to take up my copy, which I have not read until now, and cursorily examine it for relevant information from the index. B, under bisexuality. See also sexual identity problems. C, childhood sexual abuse references to gay women, homosexuality, sexual activity, sexual dysfunction, sexual identity problems, sexual repression. And so to address how they handled their study, page 91, chapter 5, the sexual component of alien abduction, quote, in the process of interviewing over 100 people who claim to be abductees, it's become painfully clear that sexuality is a major part of abduction. Duh. A vast majority of the abductees felt that the experience went well beyond reproductive curiosity and smack dab into lusty sex, unquote. In the same chapter, in setting up our protocols for the interview process, we added questions on blatant sexuality, such as, was there any physical contact? Was there actual penetration? How has this affected your earthbound sex life? What was the gender of the alien beings? How has this experience affected your ability to maintain relationships, et cetera, et cetera? The point being that these researchers who are being criticized for relating this rough statistic seemingly did their homework, seemingly did the work to try to gather the data. And then when it's mentioned, people just get all bent out of shape, which that's about, I think I already used the phrase, par for the course. Now, before I jump to a completely different subject, last week and other weeks, I'm constantly referencing Jacques Vallée's Forbidden Science journals, his volume 5, journals from 2000 to 2009. I think I quoted from it last week or the week before. This is not really specific to abductions. Actually, there's one kind of reference here. But just some random quotes here from his May 2002 entry talking about NIDS, National Institute of Discovery Science. This is the organization that was created by billionaire Bob Bigelow, who went on to take on the now infamous OSAP ATIP program in Skinwalker Ranch. Jacques Vallée says, quote, our consensus is that whatever was actually known in official UFO research has been privatized. There certainly isn't any sign that it is held anywhere inside the government. At some point, he also mentions the fact that so much money from Bigelow was thrown at the John Mack Institute, who, of course, was dealing with abductees and doing actually some of the better work in the sense of destigmatizing it and bringing it into academia, though he paid the price and won until his sad death at the hands of a drunk driver. Later on in the book, later that same year, 2002, Vallée says, yes, Yet it is true, when I review what I know, that I found no genuine UFO research. Neither did Hal or Jim Westwood or Kit Green, more cynical than ever. If there is a secret group, as I believe, it is at a different level, and everyone knows that by now. He goes on to say, Kit did mention a group that includes Chris Mellon, involved with advanced aeronautics and quote-unquote infotainment. He had to resign when legal complexities were found. He gave no details. I'm not sure. I'm guessing he means Kit. But that's the only reference in this entire book to Christopher Mellon, who, of course, we were quoting heavily from last week in regards to his criticisms, rightly so, of the recent Arrow UAP report. And then one last thing real quick from a couple pages later. October of 2002. The various events orchestrated by the Podesta Mattoon Agency on behalf of the Sci-Fi Channel and Spielberg's upcoming series on abductions are taking a bizarre turn in Washington. First, John Podesta, a high official from the Clinton administration, requested at the Washington Press Club that the government end its policy of secrecy, a move that a skeptical journalist immediately called, quote, the return of the UFO cult. The Podesta PR firm released a website, a claim under FOIA, and an article against the quote-unquote UFO cover-up by Leslie Kean. All fair and good, but it gives much play to Cometa and a crash in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, with little data. Games are being played here, beyond the obvious hype for the show. Think on that. Now, completely changing gears here. Weather modification. Is it real? Over at Newsweek.com, we've got this headline: meteorologist warns of weather wars between countries. Similarly, we have this article: no, Dubai's floods weren't caused by cloud seeding, over at Wired.com. And both these articles go into great detail about the recent claims that the massive flooding in Dubai were the result of their cloud seeding operations. And apparently the author of the Wired article has been doing quite a bit of research into cloud seeding and weather modification. So maybe he knows what he's talking about. But he's basically saying, no, it wasn't that. The author is Amit Katwala. He's an editor there based out of London. And his latest book is, I think, Tremors in the Blood, Murder, Obsession, and the Invention of the Lie Detector. Sounds exciting. But, you know, neither of these articles are actually as dismissive as I immediately assumed they were. But they just point out, again, how everything these days is so supercharged with emotion when it comes to and vitriol and just hyperbolic rhetoric when it comes to anything online, and the idea that there's something more going on than just what meets the eye. Of course, most people are going to say, oh no, it's just a part of climate change and cloud seeding. Oh, the weather modification, that's all a conspiracy theory. And neither of these articles really lean on the whole conspiracy theory angle, which I do really appreciate and am thankful for. But it just reminds me that, back in 2009 on the show I used to do with Mac White, PsyOp Radio, we had a guest on named Jerry E. Smith, who I'm going to take over Victor. We did an episode with in 2009 with Jerry E. Smith as a guest. And of course, he was the publisher of a couple of different conspiracy-oriented books, one called Weather Warfare, the Military's Plan to Draft Mother Nature, and another one on HAARP, the infamous antenna array, electromagnetic antenna array up in Alaska that was purported to be able to do all manner of things, including weather modification. Whether or not there was ever anything there is up for debate, and there's still people trying to say that this, that, or the other strange event, whether it's fires in Hawaii or, God forbid, Jewish space lasers, whatever, that somehow it's connected to HAARP. I don't know. But I do always love referencing Secretary of Defense William Cohen's April 1997 comments at a counterterrorism conference sponsored by former Senator Sam Nunn, and quoted in the DoD news briefing, quote, others, terrorists, are engaging even in an eco-type of terrorism whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes, volcanoes remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves. So there are plenty of ingenious minds out there that are at work finding ways in which they can wreak terror upon other nations. It's real, and that's the reason why we have to intensify our counterterrorism efforts. And then, of course, we've got an image of a Scientific American article about controlling hurricanes, which, of course, that was part of, if I'm remembering correctly, some of the covert operations in Vietnam and or Cambodia that have to do with the attempt to deluge certain parts of the country to ruin the trafficking, the dirt roads where the arms for the enemy were being shipped through. But one of the things I remember we covered in this interview with Jerry E. Smith was the long history of cloud seeding and how people, mock it and, make it sound as if it's some conspiracy idea, but it is still going on. It's gone on for a long time. And even the writer in the Wired magazine article, admits that he quotes the data as far as its perceived ability to change weather patterns. I think up to 25% increase in rainfall annually. Now, that's likely not something that would be immediately affecting such crazy weather patterns as described, as were witnessed in Dubai. And also, he points out that the cloud seeding apparently did not occur in the days before with their known program. Can you trust them to say yay or nay? I mean, obviously, somebody's got to be watching the sky, seeing those planes. But you can go to the Texas government's own website, tdlr.texas.gov, Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. And there are all kinds of articles there and their frequently asked questions page for weather modification, as well as their Harvesting the Texas Skies in 2022, a summary of rain enhancement operations in Texas with links to all the different programs that are actually going on. And at the bottom of the frequently asked questions is the point that you have to get a license to be able to do all this stuff. Including, let's see, weather modification law in Texas requires the applicant for a permit to publish a, quote, notice of intention to conduct weather modification operations, unquote, in area newspapers for 3 consecutive weeks. This notice apprises the public of its right to request a public hearing on the proposed cloud seeding project. In the absence of a call for a hearing, a permit application can be processed within 30 to 60 days. And one of the conversations I remember having in that interview with Jerry E. Smith was just this, how many times in the past this has cloud seeding operations and the perceived resulting flooding events, mass rain downpour events, have triggered lawsuits between different geographic regions. And that's kind of also the point of the article over at Newsweek, where they discuss the issue of the ramifications of this. Of course, if you're causing it to rain in one area, you're probably depriving some other area of the rain that they could have gotten if those clouds had not been seeded and gone on elsewhere, then maybe naturally caused a downpour somewhere else. I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of all of that. It goes to show, and I cite this regularly to people when they criticize the contrail chemtrail conspiracy theories. I'll never forget many years ago seeing a mainstream aviation magazine that my dad had as a small plane pilot that had an article about changing weather patterns in certain geographic areas due to excess lingering contrails. And there was even the implication, and I remember early in the chemtrail conspiracy theorizing, that there had been some change in the aviation fuel that was causing a change in the normal vapor trails, the contrails caused by aircraft. And that if this was causing them these contrails to linger longer, they would basically be creating their own weather patterns, that they would linger and interact with other cloud cover and change the weather locally. And that was the nature of the article I read, which I've not been able to relocate, unfortunately. But anywho, well, that's going to be it for now. Victor, if you can bring up our friend Greg Bishop's lecture. That's where I'm going, folks. I'm go check out my good friend. Oh, I got it right here, actually. Gonna go check out Alien Language lecture by Greg Bishop, brought to you by Conspiranormal folks. We're going to have a lot of lectures soon through the Anomaly Archives. In the meantime, stay weird, enjoy the strange realities that we all live in, and good night.